Hello, and welcome to Crowdfunding Complications and Countless Ways to Avoid Them. As a dyslexic writer in this space, I don't know why I chose that title, but it's the first time I've been able to say it without stumbling over the words. So welcome to the stream. We have an awesome collection of speakers today, and we're going to be tackling some of the realities around crowdfunding games, especially ones that include delivering physical content, and all the ways that those things can be perilous to organize and to think about. We are going to go through and introduce ourselves first and foremost, and then go over some of the things that we've learned with dealing about the realities and the calamities in that industry and how we've all worked through it. So can I start with Anya? Would you tell everybody who you are and what you do in the space?
Sure. Hi, my name is Anya Combs. I've been in the game space for a long time, 15 years at this point. I got my start at addictinggames.com, where I did licensing and developer relations. I played probably more Flash games than any human should, quite frankly. I then worked for Nickelodeon doing content development. I then went to Kickstarter, where I was most recently the director of games before I left, I think about a year ago today, which is pretty wild. And now I'm the tabletop, although I just like to say games account manager at BackerKit, which is pretty cool, pretty fun. And then I'm also a freelance musician here in New York City. So I'm quite busy.
Yes, you are. Speaking of busy people, Banana, introduce yourself.
Hello. I feel called out. Hi, I'm Banana Chan. She, they, he. I am the owner and co-founder of a small box board game and RPG publishing company called Game in a Curry, which we're now renaming to Read Only Memory because we're focusing more on RPGs now. And I do a lot of design work for, several different companies outside of my own company. Some of my latest work has been on Ben Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, Betrayal 3rd Edition. I co-designed Jiangshi and the Banquet Hall with Senful Lim, and I co-designed a whole bunch of other games with him. So yeah, that's me.
Amazing. Gabe, how about yourself?
Since everyone was just naming what they worked on, I had to go to my website because my memory is horrible. Hi, I'm Gabe Hicks, Gabe James Games across all platforms. I've been in the game industry for an indescript amount of time because no one knows how old I am, and I'm going to keep it that way until I don't have to. But Anna gave me a look when I told him. I've worked with Critical Role and Paizo for Pathfinder and Starfinder and Power Rangers RPG, Transformers RPG, G.I. Joe RPG, Fever Nights, Stay Bit, and I am the other half of Mythic Grove Productions with Elise. And I didn't get shamed for being too busy. So I'm going to take that and then throw it back to Elise and then pretend that whatever she says afterwards, I didn't hear.
Since I'm our HR department, I legally can't. Jian, how about yourself?
Hi, I'm Jian Shim. I'm the owner and creative director of Jian Shim Games. I've been working in the TTRPG industry since the pandemic started. So a few years, but I've been designing games way longer before that for an outdoor education program where we combine live action role playing with survival skills to teach kids. You might have heard of me from the write-ups in the Verge and Polygon, which has covered a lot of my games, including The Snow Queen and The Longest Rest, which are both in pre-order for my website right now. And I've also been a co-designer on Field Guide to Memory with Shingen Kaur, who's a noted experienced designer and artist. And I have lots of contract work all over the place. And I'm delighted to be here.
That was such an eloquent way of an unintentional flex. I'm like, okay, get off.
Thanks,
we love it.
Gabe.
Well, and we were talking a little bit before we went live about the fact that between all of us, there's a lot of crowdfunding experience, and from a varied like content kind of game-wise perspective. So to start off, we're going to set a little bit of the context for this panel, which will be really quick. And that starts with an acknowledgement that every project is going to be different. So complex and unique complications are going to have complex and unique solutions. The stuff that we're going to talk about isn't going to be a magic bullet for everything that any of you do who are watching the panel. There's a lot of nuances that go into having a really great relationship as a maker when you're crowdfunding something to a community of backers that are going to be consuming and engaging in your products. So for the next 55 minutes or so, we're going to go over some of the unique things that we've had to deal with, and either the context or the perspectives that we've come from that helped us deal with those solutions. Or sometimes it's like, the ocean's bad. You're just going to have to deal with a bad ocean as things get delivered from a very long way away. So what gives us a lot of those really insightful perspectives is the varied backgrounds that we all come from. So we're going to start off with some of the most common complications. And I think one of the first one that I would love to start with is the relationship as a maker in a crowdfunding space between the backer and the creator. And Anya, I'm wondering if I can sort of throw you up, since you've worked at places like Kickstarter or currently working at BackerKit. You have a really unique perspective to bring to this. I'm wondering if there are some things that you can share with the people who are watching the panel that you would give advice to people who are creators when starting to step into the role of having to deal with a crowdfunding backer community.
Yeah, I'm only going to speak to one facet of this, because I think if we're going to dive into any sort of like parasocial relationship conversations, I think it's much better to hear from creators than me, just to set the tone a little bit. Yeah, so I would say the relationship between creator and backer can be the best thing in the world, and boy, oh boy, can it be adversarial. I think you as the creator have the opportunity to set that tone on your project page, right? So we always at BackerKit and at Kickstarter, and you know, I am no longer at Kickstarter, but obviously my Kickstarter knowledge is arguably too much at this point. But I would always advise people, even now when I advise people that are running Kickstarter projects, right? Like, you want to respond to every comment that you feel comfortable responding to. If somebody is being like, you know, aggressive and rude or anything negative, like, you don't have to respond to those comments. But if people are asking you legitimate questions about the game and they're genuinely interested, like, respond to the comments. Create a community on Kickstarter based on what your project is, right? That also includes your updates, right? So updates, I think people sometimes sort of overlook, is this like really important part of the crowdfunding project. First of all, I would highly recommend, especially if you're a first-time creator, have your first couple of updates ready to go. Just have them like locked and loaded. Have them as like a Google Doc that you can kind of go in and just like update as you can. But your updates are a great way if you're getting like a whole bunch of questions where people have like, you know, functional questions about your game, or just like questions about characters, just something that's like, hey, this seems to be a question that we're getting over and over again, and I don't necessarily want to like continue to respond to every comment about these questions. You can use your update as a way to be like, we're going to address this in a comment, right? That relationship, some backers will kind of view their role here, let's just say, if they give you $20 for, you know, they're backing the project for $20, they're like, well, I'm actually a co-owner of this. And so some of that is like needing to set the tone of like, you are a backer on this project and we are in this together. This is a relationship where you are helping me, but I also want to make sure that I can give you the best product that I can. And the only way that I can do that is if I have the time, the energy, and the mental space to be able to like, you know, take the time to do that. So if you're prohibiting me from doing that, that is a problem that we need to talk about. So setting the tone of that, I think, is like really the key there.
And I think it's great that you point out the different ways that a crowdfunding platform can allow you to set the context for that relationship in the very design of the user experience of the platform itself, which is great. And on that note, sort of drawing boundary lines and setting up ways in which you can and will not be engaged with your community. For my designers in the room, Gabe, Banana, or Gian, do you guys want to? I know we could do a whole panel about this, but is there like a hot button moment of this has been my whale in terms of this is what is put up in front of me as a shield to protect myself in ways that I need to, while dealing with things like people feeling entitled to you as someone who is making a game and backers having a little bit of a piece of that. Gabe, you tapped on your mic. Do you want to run at that bear?
Like a very blunt thing. Avoid a parasocial friendship or relationship with people who are giving you money in that sense. Like, don't. It's. I understand the desire to be like, thank you, friends, for support, or like thank you, like you all have helped me so much. Like I'm glad that like I have friends like you. When you invite people in with words like that, they feel like they have control and priority over like decisions that you might be making, because it's no longer that they're just a customer. They're now like a friend. They're like a major part of the design of this project. They're not just buying this thing. Like I'm also a creator in this, and you need to establish that boundary both for yourself and for them, because if something goes wrong and you need to make a choice, if you've established a different sense of agency with these people, they are going to feel like they have more power over that choice than you do, to no fault of either side. And it's not necessarily ill-intended, but it can get incredibly uncomfortable if you let that fester for 6 months. Something major happens, and then now these people who may have decided, oh, but like this is a friend of mine, like I need to do everything, or they will try to circumvent, like responding on Kickstarter. They'll go to you on different places. They'll go to you, like they might find your email and be like, hey, like I'm just making sure that you're okay. Boundaries are so important when you are getting money from a variety and wider range of people.
Banana or Gian?
You go first, Banana.
I was just going to say that I really resonate with that. I do have challenges setting up boundaries sometimes. And it reminded me of like when I was working in retail, where it's just like you would have that one customer who just like thinks you are friends with them because you helped them that one time. And completely resonating with me. I think that along with that, it's just, I think that different products sort of have like a different kind of community. So like the board game community definitely has an audience that is more, I think that the way that like board games are set up on Kickstarter or like any sort of crowdfunding campaign, it is more immediate. Like the way that the campaign is structured, it looks like a lot closer to something that you would see mass market versus like something that's like more indie. So that's just the way that they set up their pages, just because like even if it's a small company, even if it's a startup, they want to look bigger than they actually are, right? Whereas like when you look at TTRPGs, like that space, sometimes they would emulate the way that board game crowdfunding campaigns do it, but also there are a lot of smaller creators that are working on their own creations on Kickstarter or Indiegogo or whatever it is, where it's not as I guess it doesn't look as much like what we see with board games. And so there might be a little bit more flexibility when it comes to the community saying like, oh, you're 2 months late, you're 3 months late, that's totally fine. Whereas like in board games, it's sort of just like, where's my stuff? It was supposed to get to me like yesterday, even though you set your target date as like 5 months from now. And so I think there are some differences between like communities or different types of like consumers for a specific product as well.
This definitely resonates. On the flip side, I also think that on the flip side of parasociality, where people act as though you know them closer personally than you might, I think there's also this intertwined and dovetailed phenomenon where people also act like you are a one person like Amazon. And there's a lot of expectation that gets loaded onto you sometimes from backers to answer questions directly as though you have like a full customer service department and all of those things. And like, I'll be real, one of the best boundaries I found for that is hiring a personal assistant who initially was someone to help me with admin work, but now she handles all of my Kickstarter updates and also responds to comments because, just like real talk, the reason why 2 of my projects are in deep delays is because my health rapidly declined very suddenly. And there are only so many times I can say like, I got long COVID and I am now very sick and I am doing.
That was ridiculously ironic and insulting timing.
Comes back.
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool.
No,
Sorry, my connection is
you're
not
great.
great.
All good.
Yeah, okay, I'm right here.
Keep going.
I was like, cool. Did it really end on I'm very sick? That's not great.
How awful. How dare you?
But the thing that I want to say as like a self boundary that I've been finding helpful and that I've often erred with is something called the fair share of attention policy, which is an old work policy from outdoor ed, which is like if you have a group of students and there's one student who's like really demanding a lot of your attention, like you need to set up some kind of boundary setting with that kid and work on some way to make sure you can pay attention to everyone in your group, because the vast majority of backers, and I think this is going to be true, the vast majority of my backers are really kind and understanding, and they deserve as much of your attention, if not more, than the people who are acting differently, right? And like whatever you can do to set up a buffer, whether it is asking like a friend or an assistant to say like, hey, can you answer these emails so that I don't have to look at them, or can you answer these comments? Remember that just because someone leaves a public comment on your project page, it's not necessarily going to like haunt you or the project. It's just there. Everyone gets like nasty comments every now and then. Most people can see that those comments are pretty unreasonable. They're not going to be approaching it from the perspective of you, where you are like stressed and worried because things are overdue. And also something I do want to note is every crowdfunding platform has its own sense of community and like style of community. And while you are setting the tone for your project per se, there's a certain momentum from the platform. And I will say that like, while it's not out of the picture for me to use Kickstarter in the future, one of the reasons I generally intend to avoid it going forward is because the backer community there is a lot more aggressive and less pleasant than literally any other crowdfunding platform I've used. And so for me, that is not a deal breaker, right? Like there is a future in which maybe I'll use Kickstarter again, but for the time being, it's just not on my plate. So that's something to keep in mind if that's something that is a factor for you.
Yeah, and both Anya and Gian spoke about using the context of the tools of the specific crowdfunding platform that you're going for as the ability to set that tone for your backers. And Gabe and Banana, you guys, I think, brought up some really great ways of setting boundaries to allow, you know, if you give a little bit of yourself every time somebody asks for it in a moment online, it's going to be death by 1,000 cuts. And or if you change one thing about the design of your game because a backer has decided that they want to have input, all of a sudden you have a game that you didn't design anymore. So make sure that you are keeping yourself as protected as you can when dealing with this outward facing platform, and use the platform to your advantage as much as you can. The other thing that I had in this sort of moment here was how to be responsible when things get complicated, especially if they are not within your control. So one of the things that Gabe and I dealt with was a technical error on our Kickstarter where we had programmed something to do something and it did the opposite of that. And we sort of had to claim like, hey, we decided to do this crowdfunding thing. We're being responsible for this error that we had no way of knowing was going to happen, and we have to set the context for how to be responsible about it, and also, you know, make sure that we're being transparent about the choices we're making going forward now that this is the reality, because we can't go back in time and change it. Does anybody have anything that they want to share about a moment and or a way in which you can be responsible even if what's happening isn't necessarily inside of your control?
I can talk a little bit about
Get in there,
shipping and
Banana.
manufacturing. So I know this is something that we're probably going to be deep diving into a little bit later, but as far as the pandemic and how it's affected like shipping and manufacturing and like, you know, all that stuff. Like for Jiangshi specifically, like it was a lot of dealing with that and making sure that, you know, we still have that communication going with our partners over our manufacturing partners over in China, and just like making sure that we're like able to have that transparency with our backers as well, and like make updates and make constant updates like whenever we hear something. So I think that that's how we sort of try to mitigate consumer expectations, but at the same time it's just like, okay, shipping prices have tripled or quadrupled, and we also have to like make sure that we have the actual resources for making the game, because, you know, as we all saw, there was this whole thing where we just didn't have a lot of resources. Like there was a paper shortage, there was like, you know, all this stuff going on. And so trying to manage like backer expectations that way by saying like, the world's kind of on fire right now. Like, you know,
you didn't think about the fact that paper could be gone on planet Earth. I don't understand.
Who knew? And yeah, just trying to tell everyone like, here's the issue. We thought things would be a little bit easier than this, but here we are. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I can add on to that, the other thing is just like being as proactive as you can. I recently got a quote from an updated quote from a printer saying, "Hey, our costs have gone up, so the quote we gave you, several months ago is now out of date. Here's the renewed one." And that update means I will have to update the supporters on the Snow Queen this Monday, saying like we're going to need to spend longer in pre-order, basically because otherwise I can't afford to get it printed.
Yeah.
And just letting people know, again, I think a really important thing about updates like this is to not be like overly apologetic or maybe apologetic at all. It's not in my control that paper now costs 10 times what it used to, or that the printers are also like really struggling to keep afloat, right? So like just give the information that's needed. If there are follow-up questions, handle it however you handle it with what we talked about before this question, and then just concentrate on your project. Like that is the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, timelines and timing, right? As things shift, we're building things in a world where the world is changing very rapidly. We're setting ourselves up to make games that we want to make with support from the community. And at the same time, you're dealing with things like, well, if there's a boat that's blocking the Suez Canal, nothing's happening, right? And you can't react to that in a way that is proactive. You can only be reactive with those things. Are there things that anybody has found that is a great way to organize your own timeline that sets you up for as much success, Gabe, that you would like to share, Gabe, with the people who are watching at home, Gabe? Any tips or tricks, Gabe, that you might...
That was it. It was, I mean, I guess to reframe it, like find someone to help you. But I was like, Elise, I don't like numbers. I don't like spreadsheets. I don't want to do this. You're like, I love that. And I'm like, thank God. And then we had a first project that made over $150,000. Like, I know your faults and find ways that you can compensate for that, whether that is programs or people. Money is a weird thing. I would rather make a little bit less, someone else makes a little bit more, and then I don't have that extra level of stress because I am not likely to make enough money that I don't care about anything. So I'd rather make enough that I need and be happy, and someone else makes the whatever extra I was gonna make or like more in that site, like in that sign and that side. Like splitting money with Elise for the Session Zero Kickstarter was probably the best thing that could have come out of it. I don't think it would have been made in the same way. She loves talking to the printers and whatever else design work that we need to do. And then I go into my cave and come out and like, I made fire. And she's like, oh, cool. We can sell the fire like this. Cool. I'm going back in my cave. Truly, there has been no greater benefit. Like we've talked about programs and stuff, but I knew that I am so unhappy doing that long term. I can do it short term. I can do it when I have to, but I don't actively want to. And not having to do that is probably what made the Kickstarter happen.
First of all, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. And also, a puzzle piece doesn't fit together if it looks exactly the same as the puzzle piece that it's trying to nest to. You should see if you can build a community around you of people who have opposing skills, because then you just have a more diversified profile of things that you're able to do as a team, right? Anya, how about you on this? Timeline and timing, especially from a platform background perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think to Gabe's point, like knowing what your strengths and your weaknesses are, first of all, being able to identify that is really challenging, right? Because like sometimes that kind of requires a little bit of truth to ourselves. And I think sometimes we're like, I'm really good at this thing. Oh no, I thought I was really good at that thing. So like that in itself is a hurdle that like once you sort of overcome that, it's great. I think with timelines, to be totally honest with you, I think there is a little bit of a reality check that your timeline is going to change. Like it's just going to change. And I think there's a level of acceptance that kind of needs to come with that. But also to Gabe's point, if you are like a first time creator or like this is your first time running a crowdfunding campaign on any platform, the thing to keep in mind is that there are thousands of people that have done this before you. And this is a very, very small community, even at tabletop video games, whatever it is. The actual industry is very, very small. And especially in tabletop, video games is like a little bit of a different beast. And that's not to say that this is untrue for video games, but tabletop, because it is so small, and then like tabletop has like niches upon niches upon niches that just get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller as you like continue in that space. But that means that there are communities of creators in those spaces that all kind of want to have, like, everybody here wants to support each other, right? Like it's that rising tide phrase that I always forget. A rising tide meets all
Lifts all boats.
There you go. I was like, meets all grapes. I don't know why I went there. I don't know why.
I love that.
Grapes of wrath. I don't know. Anyway, okay. I'm just mixing metaphors. We're doing great over here. I clearly need more coffee to get through this day. But that's all to say that, like, if a creator is successful in a space, that means that they have paved a way for other people to be successful, and there is a responsibility that sort of like comes with that. And people want each other to succeed. Like, genuinely, if there's anybody in the tabletop space that's like, I don't want this person to succeed, or I don't want everyone else to succeed. And obviously the only caveat with that is like, is this person maybe somebody who shouldn't be in this space? Okay, yes, we can all sort of be like, let's be mindful about not letting them into our community. But if there's a new creator that you are excited about, and you, like, as the person who is on the other side of it, that is responsible, we meaning even me as like a platform holder who's been in the platform space for a long time, we want you to succeed. So talk to us. Creators talk to each other. Open those doors. Like, reach out to people on Twitter. Find people at conferences and like schedule meetings, or go to their booth and have those conversations. They can help you through the process of running a crowdfunding campaign because they've done it, right? What programs did you use? Who did you talk to? Okay, well, I can't hire Elise, but because I can't afford her because she's such badass. But is there maybe somebody else who would be able to help me with timelines and budgeting, or whatever else you're sort of struggling with, right? There's a lot of people that want you to succeed in this space.
Yeah. That's great. As everybody saw, Gian popped in and out of our liminal time space. Back. We're great. You know, the internet would like to stop us and it can't. So we're just going to keep going.
Circumstances outside of your control, and then you find a way around them. This is what the whole panel's about. So it's all good.
It's Onion. It's your cat. It's
always Onion. Just assume it's my cat. Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Dovetailing off of that, and sort of we're coming up on the last sort of 20-ish minutes of the panel. I want to get to some questions we've had in chat, but I also want to sort of mash two of the last big things that we wanted to talk about for our pre-prepared questions for our panelists: under-preparing, over-promising, and then the big blockers of shipping, logistics, and production. We could live and die in all of the information that is built in there, but things like how to decide what you can accomplish, making a plan that is an if-then plan to be adaptable, drowning in perks, and having so much of your crowdfunding project be on the backs of stretch goals that aren't the original product that you have to go into production to, and then dealing with the additional logistics and the shipping and the production of it. Banana, I know you wanted to talk, and I know that Jiangshi had a lot of complications in that regard. What are some ways that you wanted to share with folks who are watching to sort of help tackle some of those things? Because there's a lot in there.
Yeah, there is a lot. I would say that calculating the actual weight of your product is something that I think we just sort of forget about, right? Like, especially when it comes to products that are in a box. Like, if you say, say you have a whole bunch of stretch goals, and some of them have minis or extra cards or different paperweights, then that all sort of adds up into a different sized box, or not a different sized box. The box might be the same, but like the weight of the box itself might go up exponentially. And so you sort of have to think about, like, okay, it's going to get from point A, like the manufacturer, to you, or your warehouse, or wherever that is. And then don't even get me started on warehouse costs. But there's that. And then there's distribution, like you have to pay your distributor, and, sending that over to the end point, which is the end consumer, right? Like, trying to figure out how much all of that is going to cost, because when you're shipping something, if it's heavier, it's going to cost more. And so keeping that in mind, and also keeping in mind that a larger product will take up more space in a warehouse, and therefore you might have to pay more money. And just having all of that in mind before you build out your stretch goals. I love digital stretch goals. Digital stretch goals are great because they don't take up physical space. I mean, yes, they'll take up your computer space, but the best thing about it is that you don't have to worry about the shipping costs. You don't have to worry about all these other things, logistics, manufacturing. And so I think that if you want to have soundtracks for your game, or if you want to have digital invitations for your game, PDFs, more art that could go into the PDF. Those are different ways that you can still make it cool and fun, but you're mitigating the risk of shipping, manufacturing, all of that.
Yeah, that's really great.
I also am on the digital perks are great train. I also, unfortunately, love tinkering with physical stuff and often make my own as someone who does make traditional art and analog art. And I think, just double whatever timeline you think you need is my advice. I went from someone who works very fast and then after I got COVID to someone who works very, very, very slow. And so I'm still fulfilling art that I promised that I make with my own hands out of my living room. And if you are doing really bespoke perks like that, just give yourself a really generous amount of time. And also speaking to perks you might not expect to drown in, if you are hiring a lot of artists for a physical book, remember that that's going to add a page count. And the more art you add, the more paper is in your book and the more it's going to weigh. So there are things that sneak up on you without really knowing ahead of time, or it can occurring to you oh, this might affect the weight of my envelope, and that is going to cost more through media mail or through a rated shipping in first class, or whatever you're using, all the things stack up. So give yourself a very generous buffer in your budgeting and your accounting as well. You just don't know what's going to catch you on your heels otherwise.
Yeah, and you can't know what you don't know. And
exactly.
a lot of the point of this panel, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it in the Discord for anybody who has additional questions. There's so many logistical complications that can come up that you didn't even know you needed to be paying attention to. So building out adaptability in your plan to be able to catch some of those is a really great way of making sure that you're setting yourself up for as much success as possible. Yes. We're going to move over to a couple of questions from chat. The first one of which I think this is really fun is, what do you do on launch day to keep yourself from the anxiety monster? And I think even Anya, you can talk to this too, because I can imagine that with, you worked really closely with Gabe and I for our backer kit integration for our Kickstarter. There's excitement. There's a lot of nerves. There's a lot of wanting it to go well. What are some of the things that you guys all do to keep yourself a little bit more centered and a little bit more in your bodies and focused for game day?
Yeah, I mean, I launched a Kickstarter in 2019. My band, we did a Kickstarter, and even though I'd been an employee of Kickstarter by 3 or 4 years at that point, and I still was like, oh my god, what are we doing? What are we doing? What's happening? This is terrifying, right? I think anxiety can become a monster, but a lot of it is about how you manage it, right? So if you've done your prep work, so there's a big difference between launching a Kickstarter and just sort of being I don't know, we'll figure it out, whatever, it's all good. And I have seen that, and there are people who have no anxiety about that. They're I just kind of wanted to see what was going to happen, right? And that's totally valid, and that's legit. Those are the funny ones to me, because I've seen those just crash and burn, and they're just okay, cool, whatever. And I'm
wow,
respect. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
that's totally fine. So I think the anxiety is incredibly normal. And you're going, if this is your entire life, right? This is you've put your life's work into your Kickstarter project. Yeah, you are absolutely going to feel anxious. So I'd say whatever you need to do with any sort of creative output that you feel anxiety in, right? Like I get super nervous sometimes before I like play a gig, and I'll just like take a couple breaths and just sort of sit there and be like, right, but this is fun and I love doing this. This is what brings me joy and this is what makes me fulfilled. So just having that like a little bit of just like positive affirmation and self-talk of like, cool, let me just have the time to do that. If that's like drinking a cup of tea, if that's honestly having a shot of something, right? Like whatever it is that you need to do to calm your nerves, Gabe.
Oh.
You have no idea what's in the cup. Keep going.
I mean, this is water for all you know. It is water.
I do love that your camera blurred it out like it was something to like. Anya, are you sure? Oh my gosh.
It is water. I promise. It's just water.
It's being censored by your. That's great. That's so
I know.
funny.
I also love that it's like a massive mason jar.
I know.
Right.
Direct from your moonshine still.
I know, right?
Free drink minimum over here.
Look, as far as you
Gabe.
know, I have a mini fridge right here.
Yes.
So
Yes.
Mhm.
That's too true. Gabe, how about you? Launch day, go time. What do you do?
Two things. One, surprising no one. I go in the woods. I don't want technology around me sometimes. And if you are looking at that number going up and it's making you feel like you're going bonkers, get up and take a step away. It's gonna keep going. If something major really breaks, chances are someone will tell you. Like you'll get a text, you'll get a message from the people who know about it. But if something goes wrong, they'll let you know. So if you need to just get up and walk away for 30 minutes, do that. Because it's going to keep you sitting here watching that number is not going to make it change. Putting things out there, talking about it on the social media, that's something else that you can actively do rather than just staring at it. But if you're just staring at that number going up and you feel your anxiety rising, it is not going to stop because you've got, if chances are if you launch, you've got 30 more days of this, homie. So like just
it's a marathon.
Get up and go. Not watching this hour is not going to change those 29 days.
No. I was making like a you and me same hat gesture because I drive my friends crazy. When I launch, I actually close the tab or window and I don't look at it on my phone. And my friends are like, "Are you seeing this?" And I'm like, no. I am out getting a taco or walking around the lake or literally anything other than looking at it. And I generally don't look at my launch page for like several hours or more after the moment of launch because I just know otherwise I'm going to be stuck at it like someone at a slot machine in a casino, just constantly refreshing. And that's not great for me. It doesn't help me with my marketing. If I've done my work and I have a bunch of pre-scheduled posts about it, like you can kind of set it and forget it unless something goes wrong, in which case, again, trust me, someone will let you know.
I've done that. I have a slot machine in my living room. I did go use it during the Kickstarter when I wanted to.
I can attest there's an actual slot machine in Gabe's living room.
Yeah, it's dope.
You're an incomprehensible fey being. I don't know what to say, man.
Amazing.
Banana, how about you?
So I am going through that because with Forgery, like I was refreshing over and over again because it's a new platform. Like I wasn't familiar with like Indiegogo at all. And I've been using Kickstarter for like, up until this point. And so with that, it was sort of a panic where I was just like, I have no idea where I'm doing. And so for me, like focusing on the things I can control has been helpful. I can tweet stuff out. I can, just close out my window and I can go do something else completely different and focus, I don't know, on my day job or something like that. Like focusing on like anything other than just like refreshing stuff and trying to focus on like the things that you can control. That's been helpful for me. So.
Yeah, I think, I don't know where I heard it, but somebody said, I am not my feelings. My feelings makes requests. They don't tell me where I am or who I am. So if you listen to those, like that anxiety that you're feeling, it's making a request. It's requesting that whatever you're doing right now, you don't do anymore. So I think going and changing the scenery or changing the action that you're doing is a great way of sort of dealing with launch. And also just give yourself permission to write things down. when we had our launch, I had a whole spreadsheet of like, so here are all the things that are going to happen in order, and I sort of know where I am in the universe. And for me, that was like I gave myself a jar to sit in for that day, so that I knew that anything that happened outside of that could wait. I didn't need to do everything. I just needed to do these things. And if I did these things and I had a little bit of my spoons left over for when things went wrong, which they then or awry, they went awry, right? Just, give yourself permission to operate inside of a spectrum. Give yourself a permission to have an onion.
Jesus Christ. Sorry about that.
We love it. I was
know,
hoping that we would have an onion.
He's so big and
Thank you
muscular.
so much.
Like,
He's so jacked. You have no idea. I would kill for his muscle definition. Anyway, I don't want to get more distracted than we already have.
No, it's all great.
He's here.
We've had a couple more questions pop up in the Twitch chat, which we will, and they're very big, questions. We're going to get to some of those in Discord, but the one I wanted to end on was, for each of you, what's a reasonable amount of communication for your project, and how do you go about finding that? Maybe specifically with updates, but like when people want more of you than you can give, what's a really great way to make sure that you're taking care of yourself in that, and also giving to your crowdfunding project what it may need to have the best chance of success?
Hire a community manager.
Yeah.
Yes. 100,000%. Yeah. Also, in terms of actual like rates of communication, I found that every other week is fine. You're gonna hit the majority of your project timeline is probably gonna be like, it's still going, it's still happening there. I am still staring at my computer and writing, and I'm still, and like it feels like for you it's not going to feel like an update, but just like a reassurance for people of like every 2 weeks of like you haven't fallen into a crevasse in the center of the earth or something, like is nice. But it doesn't need to be more than that, in my experience.
I think every 2 weeks is perfect, especially if the second time during the month you're like, you know what, like I'm happy with how this thing turned out. You don't have to say what the thing is, but it's like if you remind people that you're excited, or it's like I am trying to figure out this thing that's confusing, but like I think I've got something, but the rest of this is still flowing. Like if nothing else, people don't even necessarily need an update on exactly how the project is going, but how your experience on the project is going, because they're like, oh, like Gabe's having a great time. All right, cool. That's all I wanted to know. Or it's like, Gabe's struggling. Well, I hope you figure that out, because especially when if you're a smaller company or individual or group, remind people that you're a person.
Yeah.
You can be a business that is owned by a person, and the person is the forefront of the business, but people are interacting with a person. Unless you're like a bigger corporation, like remind people that you are a person with so many resources, and that sometimes things aren't changing. So like Gabe's having a great week, things designing, I'm happy, nothing's different, but that's a good thing. And people will be like, and they'll go about their day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think to add on to what Gabe was saying, like we do sometimes dress ourselves up to be like a larger entity than we actually are, just so that, we look legitimate and people will trust us with their money. But at the same time, like what Gabe was saying, like we sometimes are just one person managing all this stuff. Gian, I know that you manage a lot of things. So it's like definitely one of those things where it's just like, only one person dealing with like multiple jobs, like it's a lot, right? And so trying to spread out that work, outsourcing that work is great. And I think that like when it comes to updates during the campaign itself, spreading it out so that way it's based off of how well you are doing. So at the 50% mark, or at the 100% mark, or 150, or like, whenever we hit a stretch goal, like have those updates ready. Anya, I think you mentioned earlier, like, having a Google Doc or something like that, so that way your updates are prepared. Having something like that during the entirety of the campaign, just so you have it ready to go, like that's amazing. And also like having, I think for us specifically, like when we're dealing with updates after the campaign, having it every month is great. I'm just like, okay, we can do it every month. And occasionally we will talk about our other campaigns that are happening or other projects that we're working on. So that way, you can get marketing over there as well.
Yeah. And I think in all of this, specifically for building a context around your relationship with your backers, you actually get to say. So one of the things that Gabe and I did was, hey guys, post campaign, you're going to be hearing from us once a month. And if there are additional updates, fantastic. But like, here's what you actually get to say. And then as long as you're showing up and fulfilling on that thing that you've said, you're setting your expectations for the people that are in this community that you've brought around. And don't be afraid to set those different expectations. Because I think that in that way, you give permission for people to show up in the space that you've provided for them. You're a curator of the space. And if you curate that space to say, this is where you can expect me, and then you show up, you've met people's expectations, and you've also given those expectations for them to expect of you, which is really great. We've got about 4 minutes left. There have been a couple of questions in terms of like, how about marketing and how about accounting and how about taxes? I would love to say hire all of those professionals, because you cannot be an accountant. You can't be a community manager. You can't be a tax accountant. You can't have your books. That's also a lot of money. And not every project is going to be able to withstand all of those employees. That's 4 people's jobs, right?
Yeah.
Any way in which you can find to work with somebody on a trade. Perhaps you've got the Kickstarter, you can agree on, there's a lot of creative ways that you can engage with different functional aspects of building up on your crowdfunding platform. But all of those things are also going to be very different based on different people's projects. I'm our accountant. It's a horrible thing. I'm very much looking forward to the day that I don't have to worry about paying freelancers. Don't turn your mic on, Gabe.
I'm sorry. She called me out like that. I'm like, I'm our accountant. Who else are you talking about?
But you also only have so many resources. So you can't necessarily hire an accountant and a tax accountant and a community manager all at once. Find the balance. Find the balance that works best for you. Again, we can talk about a lot of things that specifically people have done, because I'd be fascinated to know, like, Anya and Gian and Banana, what you guys do for managing the books and stuff like that. That's a whole other layer. But again, that's a whole other layer of organizing on top of all of this and dealing with the business side of thing, which isn't even just like being a creator facing outward. But I would love to sort of end this with a little bit of where each of you all are on the internet, something about what you're working on right now. And then whether or not you're going to be joining us in Discord. Not everybody's going to be able to make it. This is a 24-hour stream for Big Bad Online. So a lot of people are running on to many and more things. Anya, why don't we start with you? Tell people where they can find you and some of the projects that you might be working on now, or anything you want to share with the folks that are watching.
Sure. You can find me on Twitter. My Twitter is at ANYAYNA. It's Anya as a palindrome. I thought I was really clever when I made it.
I love that.
Yeah. It's so silly. If you are interested in learning more about BackerKit, we do crowdfunding, marketing, pledge management, all that cool stuff. You can drop me a DM. My DMs are open. And if you follow me on Twitter, I actually have 3 records coming out this year, because, as you do.
You're not busy enough?
No, I'm not busy enough. I'm definitely not going to be able to jump into the Discord because I have to run to a 4-hour gig. That's not happening. That's fine. But yeah, I do a lot of music stuff. My Instagram is at Anya Combs Her Hair. You can follow me there for more music stuff. I try to keep the music and game stuff a little bit separate. But yeah, I'm around. I do stuff.
That's fantastic. And for anybody who is in the crowdfunding world and looking into getting resources, BackerKit has some of the most incredible free video resources. Kickstarter too. A lot of the companies, a lot of the questions people ask go right to the platform that you're using. There's going to be a lot of creator resources to be able to use. Gian, how about yourself?
If you want to know about my work, I do have a mailing list that also has lots of other like goodies in it, and you can get that from my website, which is jiangshim.games. Made it easy to find. If you want to hear about my chaotic goblin life, then Twitter is a good place to find me. It is just Jiangshi. If you look for Jiangshi on most social media platforms, because for some reason you want to find me there, that's a good way to start. But those are the two main places I would direct people. Yeah, that's what I got. Also, can't recommend BackerKit enough. If you want someone to help you manage a campaign, especially if it's gotten like larger scale than you expected, highly recommend BackerKit. Yeah, absolutely.
Gabe, how about yourself?
Gabe James Games most places, and if you can't find me there, then my name's different and you won't.
Got anything you want to share with the people about what you're doing, Gabe? What are you up to these days?
I've got like a couple small system things in mind. I'm probably gonna put up on Patreon. I'm actually like working through an old crowdfunder project that has been like the bane of my existence for reasons that I won't get into. But like nailing stuff out, probably gonna be having about 2-3 things out in the next few months. And Twitter is probably the place you'll find it until it blows up. And
If
then
it's
you won't.
still there.
Then you won't. If you can't find me, good.
You're in the woods.
Sure.
Banana, how about you?
You can find me on most social media platforms under Banana Chan Games. You can find my company, Game in a Curry, at Game in a Curry on most social media platforms, I believe. And as far as things I'm working on right now, we just ended our crowdfunding campaign for the Revenant Society through Van Ryder Games. That's designed by myself and Senfon Lim. That's a historical game set in like 1910s Paris or 1920s New York. It's got a time loop thing. It's pretty cool. Check that out. But the crowdfunding campaign's already over, so ignore that. I just said that. The other thing that I'm working on is Forgery, which is a solo horror RPG that uses paint by numbers, and you are just like a disgruntled art forger, and you are commissioned to recreate a cursed painting, and that is on Indiegogo. So
incredible. And that's still going, so go check that out. My